now. You just keep moving.
Mm-hmm. Right? Absolutely.
And keep doing your thing.
Yeah.
It happens.
Do what you love.
Yeah.
Most boys, most like 10-year-old boys, they get together with the other boys and they play cowboys and Indians or cops and robbers or something that you just figure that's what boys are off doing. And he'd round up his brothers and they'd take old ketchup bottles and old Coke bottles and whatever they could find, and they'd play factory, which was winery. They were basically pretending to fill up all these bottles of whatever they had with pretend wine, which I can only imagine was some concoction of water and toothpaste and whatever else a 10-year-old. His whole life he's been on this trajectory to get to this point. And right out of high school he joined the military. Vietnam was going on. He did the Air Force there. After that he came out and worked for the local telephone department.
He did.
And then he went to work for the New York State Thruway Authority. And when he retired from that, he was finally able to borrow enough money to build this and realize his dream.
Wow.
And
you know, not many people have something like that from that young.
Right. It's
like,
drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here he is. He's 76 years old. He's still putting in 80 hours a week. Easy. He's
love
right
that.
now, as we speak, the reason he is not giving this interview is he's out there fixing busted posts because it's been such a windy year. Posts been breaking left and right. And we'll be picking grapes on Sunday. And the only way we can do that is if the vineyard is in tip-top shape. So he's out there replacing all the posts, right?
Even if this wasn't one of the most prettiest views I've ever seen in Western New York, it's still a special place.
Oh, absolutely.
But you're folding over this beautiful wine with this beautiful location and a beautiful view. And so here's $1 million question. Did he know that this was going to be the spot? Did he have this in mind for a long time?
So when he got out of the service, he started collecting little bits of land with grapes on them over in Brockton.
He did.
And then in 1979, this piece of property went up for sale. And he drove by it just to check it out. He saw the view. He pulled over, talked to the guy, made a deal with him that day, and bought the farm. But it was contingent upon he had to sell his property over in Brockton to be able to get this.
Wow.
But absolutely, once he saw it was available, that was in 1979. The winery didn't get opened until 2005.
Holy cow.
So patience and vision were at every step of this.
So he buys the land. Did he put a house here? Or did he
There was already a house.
Oh, there was?
Yeah, he bought the house with the...
Oh, the house was attached. So
right.
Was there a house on this property right now, or is it across the street?
It's right down there. You can't quite see it from your angle.
Oh, it's here on the property.
Yep,
I'll have to check it out later. So he moved here once he sold the property.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
So now, but the vision was the winery.
Absolutely, yes.
And he already had been
working towards
essentially,
it, yes.
right? So he's doing his thing over there, and he's figuring it out.
Yep.
For how long was he there?
I couldn't quote a number and feel confident about it.
A good while, right?
Yes.
Learning the industry, learning the trade, learning this craft and skill.
And at the same time, just being alive in this region, if you have any interest in wine, one thing I might have mentioned earlier was that about every third house in the area is making wine in the basement. So just by knowing people, you're going to absorb a lot of information by osmosis.
It's part of the culture.
It's part of the culture.
Right. And he had a passion for it since he was born.
Yes. Since before he was drinking, he knew this is what he wanted to do.
He was just interested in it.
And I'm sure growing up, he'd seen a lot of the adults going down into the basement and coming back with wine. And when they did, everybody'd get excited, right? Dinner was that much more fun.
He was happy.
Yeah.
So he moves here. Now we're talking, that's a huge, huge gap. That's like, what is it? Was it 30 years? Almost.
Yeah, about 26 years.
26 years. So in the context of those 2 decades, was this property, was he slowly developing this?
He was. There was actually grapes where we're standing right now.
Okay.
This was the vineyard that he ended his days on, meaning like in the morning he'd work over there, in the afternoon he'd work over there, and then when sunset approached, he'd find an excuse to work in this vineyard here so that he could see the sunset.
How satisfying. Wow. This porch. I don't know if I've ever seen a porch like this. He took full advantage of this view, right?
Did his best.
So, can you purchase the wine outside of Noble? Or, like, if we were to go to a liquor store or wherever, does it get distributed outside?
We don't really distribute, but we're not opposed to it. If you went to your local liquor store
And asked for it.
you asked for it and they called us, we would be able to get it to them.
You would. Before you even met Pete, you know how to make wine.
That's correct.
So that's a good thing, right? And so having met him, he had been making wine for a long
For
time.
decades, oh yes.
Did you guys write it? And that must have been a huge bond when you met him.
Oh yeah.
Like you're
yeah.
both winemakers.
He's a great guy, yeah.
Yeah, so now it maybe in his head, he was like, this is great.
Yeah, it's meant to be.
Yeah, and now here you are, how many years later, and you guys are really running the whole show here, right?
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he's out there somewhere right now. I really do. With you, it's making wine. You've been making wine since your brain was getting wired up. And now you've built this whole synaptic neural network of this is second nature to us. It's like breathing. And you probably are great at manipulating the grape, which I've talked about before, like how that's amazing to me that you can take something and say, this year it's a little different. And you know exactly how to contour that palette in a huge batch to get that uniformity of that particular batch for that year, dependent upon the variant.
Yep. Yeah.
It's amazing to me.
I mean,
It's
one
like
thing
painting.
to keep in mind, though, is there's no such thing as a normal year.
Never,
Every year
right?
gives you something brand new that has not
Some
happened in
crazy
your
surprise.
lifetime yet.
So you got to work with that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
Now,
It's
does that
always
mean
learning.
You might make it? Is that meaning I would make another batch? I don't know what happened here, but I'm going to work with this, and we've got this other wine now. Or is it? You mean just in the context of that particular grape? It's never the same twice.
Right. That.
Ever. There's always, it's more acidic, it's more sweet.
Yes.
The skin's a little thicker, it's a little
Right.
lighter last year.
Yeah.
It pops a little bit more.
For instance, this year, one of the bizarre things that we're encountering is that even though sugar is one of our typical measurements of ripeness,
Okay.
and as the sugars are at the point where we'd want to pick them,
Right.
the color is not really there yet.
So
Which-
you pick them before.
Typically, the color is much more pronounced long before this much sugar is there.
So,
And we don't know why.
right.
And it's not just happening in one type of grape. It's all of the grapes this year are producing sugar much faster than they're producing color.
Oh, that's weird. So you just got to gobble them down, or you just got to test the palate on the grape at
Yeah,
that point,
yeah.
right? There's no, you can't put them in a machine and say, you got to use your own.
Well, you can put things in machines and get numbers that can be corresponded to charts. We can measure the sweetness level based on the insoluble solids that occur at a known rate within the sugar. Like, it's not the sugar itself, it's the things that show
Gotcha,
up with
that
it.
constitute
They
it.
bend light as it goes through,
Okay.
right? So we have these little refractometers. We'll put a couple drops on there and we look through it. And based on how much the light is bent, it tells us how much sugar is there.
That's amazing.
And that's old technology, right? That's at least 100 years old.
Really? So that's been going on for a long time.
Yes. Yes, the whole scale we use was developed in France. I'm not sure when, but it was sometime in the 1800s.
So do you utilize that for this? Is
We
that
do,
what you're-
we do,
So you're
yeah.
you're trying to just accurately say to
Well-
so much of a degree that this is this way, so we got to counteract that with.
Like, your palate is important, but so are your notes.
Right.
And if you want to go back to 7 years ago and see what it was, you need numbers that you wrote down.
Gotcha.
So while we are tasting grapes as we go, we're also doing every test we can think of and writing down the data.
Wow. It's a fascinating industry.
Oh, it
It
is.
really is. It's amazing because it's art and science.
Oh, yes.
And anytime you get a confluence of art and science, because there's some industries that are just hard science, and there's some industries that are almost just straight art. And I love when an industry can cross over like this because it's you. And I think that's the value of a winery and a winemaker because you're you, there's not another you, and there's not another palate that you have.
That's correct.
And that creates this unique experience with your product. It's like a great chef. There's only one of them. So your palate's could be a little bit different. And you could have 15 chefs on the same, line, and everybody makes the same thing. It's still going to be a little bit different. And it's just that is what I love about it, that you can analyze it all you want, break it down, but at the end of the day, it's your palate, your skill set that creates the difference from a great wine from a so-so wine.
Absolutely.
You know, and people love your wine. So, and now, do you think it's because it's you and Pete that really are at the head of this, making this wine? Is it a good analogy to say that the two of you are creating this palette together, and that's what is constituting the flavor profile that we know is noble?
Absolutely. Yeah, we come at it from different angles.
Right.
So, you know, well, depending upon what it is that you're looking for during the process of fermentation, you can do things like introducing air.
And so you just got to know, like...
Well, we're constantly pulling samples and we're checking it on the go while it's fermenting. A lot of things can go wrong at that point.
Because that's not... It's what you want, but too much is going to kill it, right?
And while, like, people like to oversimplify and think, like, yeast is yeast.
Right.
But that's like saying dogs are dogs.
Yes,
like,
and I'm coming from, we made our own dough for 32 years, so I know, yeah.
Once, like, you have a couple of minutes go by, and there's whole new generations of yeast being born.
Right.
Like, before long, they're evolving in whatever direction they want to go.
Right.
So you've got to be on top of that and know where they're going. And if they start heading in a direction that you're not happy with, you need to steer them back towards what you had in mind.
Right, that's a great way to put it. I can see that. And that's what you're doing.
Yes.
So it's that manipulation and that balance. And again, every batch is different.
They are. Every year the grapes come in different. As I said, this year we're going to have sweet wines that have less color than the comparable product of last year. And every year is unique, and that helps the romance of the story.
It does.
I mean,
yeah, it's the best part of the story, really, right?
And when you get like the master sommeliers, right? Like part of their job is being able to identify, like, oh yeah, 2007 was a drought in that region. You can really tell, like you can smell it and taste it in the glass.
Crazy when you think about.
Oh yeah.
Like this, I don't even know. You know, that's like FBI type of stuff.
Yeah.
Because they show up and they're like, he was killed with a knife, there was a fork involved, and it was Thursday at 2.
And,
like,
and the guy weighed 185.
Yeah. You're like, are you kidding me? So do you have weddings here? Do you have events? Just to talk about your facility itself.
We do have weddings. As far as events go, we typically just, like we partner with, we're in between Ripley and Westfield.
Okay.
We tend to partner with both libraries, and whenever either one of them wants to do a fundraiser, they might hire a band.
Right.
They might do a murder mystery dinner.
Gotcha.
Right.
Now, if somebody comes in here, what can we expect when we come into the tasting room? Like, would you have specials? Do you have anything that's a standard thing that you're selling on a daily basis?
Well, we have just over 20 products that we sell every day.
Every day.
Everything's available every day.
Awesome.
Part of the reason we don't have events, or the events that we do have, we have rules that say that, like, we are not willing to shut down. Because if we have a regular who drove 3 hours to come here, and we said, oh, there's a private event, you can't come in, we probably just insulted one of our great customers, yeah.
Right. That's a great philosophy.
So, yeah, we always have everything available.
Everybody's welcome.
Yes.
At all times.
If it's the middle of January and you decide to brave the snow and come here, we're going to treat you like long-lost family that we haven't seen in forever. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk about the kids. We're going to, you know, we want to know how you're doing.
Yeah. Well, it's important, though. It's like my restaurant. You know, for 32 years, people watch me. Hours that you guys are open?
From 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. during the nicer half of the year, and from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. during the
so you guys are open all year.
Oh, yes. Well, we figure like middle of January, we can go 3 days in a row without seeing a customer.
Sure.
But we're here checking on the wine, filtering wine, bottling wine.
Business doesn't stop.
Right. And like I said, if somebody drove 3 hours to come see us, who are we to turn them away?
Right. And it's fun at that point then, too, because now it's really intimate.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get that because, and this is all seasons beautiful. There's no way. Like, I could even I love weather. So even, there was a sign, I was headed out of Canandaigua, and there's a little, it's like a country shop. And I was parked in the corner, and I went inside and I was talking to the lady. We were talking about weather, and she's like, "Go outside and walk around the building. There's a mural I think you'd like to see." And all it said was a man fishing in a terrible day outside, but it said all weather is good weather. And I love that. And
Yeah.
This has got to be beautiful, like a storm coming across the lake. Has got to be just awesome to watch from this porch. Now the building. So you build the building. Is this what it was from the get-go? Was this the building that Amish had built for you?
No, every year we typically find some way to add on a little bit. The original building just goes down to the end of this porch here,
Okay.
and you can see a separation there.
Okay.
And then we tacked on another section that's just as big, which is now basically warehousing.
Okay.
And then this part that juts out here, we added a couple years after that, and those are cooling rooms.
Okay.
So we can temperature control large areas.
Can.
Yes.
So you keep it under.
Right. So
And-
that way, when we're done making the wine, we can keep it chilled until we're ready to bottle it,
Oh, that's
which
awesome.
keeps it stable.
So you capture that
Right.
profile
For that
and
moment,
That's the point
yeah.
of that.
Yes.
And those are new. That's a new addition.
Yeah, relatively
Yeah.
5 years.
And so, what did you do prior to that? Like, how do you retain the? Is that a whole thing? Like to try to capture that?
So what we were doing is you can get these refrigeration trailers.
Okay.
Like they'd haul ice cream in or
Okay,
milk
sure,
or
like the
anything
ones we
else.
see on the through.
Right.
Right.
You can rent those,
Okay.
and they're cost prohibitive. So it basically made it so that
Oh my gosh, you guys had that. So that's what you would do.
we were renting trailers and filling them with the wine, right? Putting small tanks inside them
Right.
and loading them all up and bringing them all down to temp,
Holy
and
cow.
then getting them into a bottle as soon as we could, so we could stop renting these trailers.
You just had like a PTSD. That's why, because I was wondering why you went, phew. So it was a lot of
It was, and
was
you had to monitor
intense.
them all the time because they were diesel. So, you
You
had
could
to
get-
keep topping them off,
Right.
so that they would keep running.
You know what? I love that though, because that is what it takes sometimes. You're like, well, we don't have that facility yet. How are we going to do this? So you didn't have a choice. So it was a lot of extra work.
It was,
to make sure that,
but it worked.
Yeah, and that's all. And it's good experience.
It is. It
Yeah.
helps you appreciate when you get something like this.
Dude,
right?
it's no different.
And the original way we bottled, our default batch size is about 300 gallons.
Okay.
Some batches are bigger than that or not, but we'll refer to them as two
Okay.
batches or 2.5 batches, right?
Right.
300 gallons is our increment of
Okay.
thinking. And a 300-gallon batch used to take us 5.5 hours to bottle,
Now, see, to me, that seems really quick.
and it was very labor intensive. Now we've upgraded to a bottling line, which we can do the same thing with a lot less elbow grease.
I can't only imagine, man. You're I've got some serious.
And now it takes us an hour and 10 minutes, an hour and 15.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
That's
and you
intense.
really appreciate.
Bill Merritt was telling us about how him and his wife would do the bottling and the labeling.
Yes.
And then they had this
Yeah.
foot machine. And so it's the same story.
Oh, yes.
And I love that though, because that's what it takes. Again, people don't realize when you start a business, 99% of us start a business because we love what we do. We have this dream that we want to fulfill, and we don't have the money for it, but we
Right.
have the work ethic. You know what? You know what's great about doing what I do is to see all of you guys and hear your stories. Do you know everybody said that to me? Independently of everybody else. Nobody's been together in a group. Everybody has said that at some point. I have it on camera. I have everybody saying we are all, it's high tides floats all ships.
Yes.
We are all in this together. We're all helping one another rise. And raise this entire industry in this region.
Absolutely.
Goes all the way back to Fred and Bill's dads.
Yep.
And all the way up to now, everybody's kind of like, you know what? I'm winning if you're winning.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, when there was 5 wineries in the area, there was very little traffic coming because of the wineries.
Right.
Now that there's 20-some wineries in the area, a lot more people are coming because it's worth your time. You can spend a whole day doing it.
People love doing this.
And the more of us there are, the more rich the experience, the more you can find the experience that you're looking for.
Yep. And that's what it is.